Do you have designs on making a sizable charitable donation? And would you like to avoid some common mistakes? Well, here to talk with me about that is Dennis Stearns from Stearns Financial Group. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's good to have you here. You recently wrote an article about this very topic for Retirement Daily, and we're eager to have you walk us through the 10 ways to avoid philanthropy fumbles.
Yeah, philanthropy fumbles. And, what's fascinating is that we're in the midst of some major shifts in philanthropy that actually started back the last decade. But then the whole pandemic sort of turned a lot of things on its ear. And so, we have a lot of clients who are thinking about either giving their time, treasure, or talent to a nonprofit, sometimes all three. And so the question is, how can you do that in a way that will be satisfying to both you and the nonprofit?
All right. So in the article, you list the 10 ways. Do you want to go through them step by step?
Sure. And so, I think number one is thinking about the fact that nonprofits are, especially executive directors and staff, are poorly paid and poorly equipped for their task. And there's some of that out there with especially some of the really small nonprofits, but for the large part, the people that are running the medium-sized nonprofits and larger, they could be in the for-profit space. And I've met many of them who were in the for-profit space, and they could be making double or triple the amount of money. It's always dangerous to assume anything when you're kind of getting connected or engaged with your own nonprofit. And this kind of gets to number two, which is believe that you need a unique goal or niche. And so we have seen some really good nonprofit creativity where they've invented some new mousetrap that made them better. And, we were just talking about the YMCAs that, we're both collectively on the board of different ones, and some pretty cool things that they're coming up with. And so that's good. But what's interesting is that most of the time, if you just do what you know well, and you can do more of it, if you can scale it, that will be really good. And the paradox of that is that if you take something that should be really a niche nonprofit community service and try to scale it, you can ruin it. So again, you just have to be careful. One size fits one when it comes to some of this niching and innovation and creativity. Number three, thinking about strategy in a competitive context. Again, this is something we've seen a lot of people do who've joined boards. I've been on various boards where I've either been the chair or I've been, part of the board, and we get some new person and maybe they were, a big shot executive in their career. And they said, well, this should all be done this way. The way we did it back at, 3M or, a business. And the reality is that nonprofits have different outputs of what denotes excellence. And so you really have to be careful. This is not so much for somebody giving money as it is somebody wanting to be in a governance or a volunteer role.
Mm.
And
I just interrupt. I know from personal experience, I was once the president of a nonprofit, small, where we had hired a consultant to help us what we described as professionalize what heretofore had been a mom and pop business. And we didn't necessarily succeed, I have to admit.
Yeah, it can be hard. And it's the same, but it's the same issue in some respects as small companies that try to get up to a certain medium-sized company level. Sometimes the people that you started with aren't the people that are going to get you to the next level. So in that respect, there is some similarities with nonprofits that are growing. And we had a great experience with one of our clients. He had a nonprofit that had done great work for his son who had a traumatizing injury, had helped him through it. I mean, it was just gut-wrenching. And so our client wanted to do something nice for them. But he didn't just want to write a check. He wanted something, the old saying about you teach them to fish instead of giving them a fish. So he tasked us to go in, interview the leadership team, and find out what they wanted, find out what they needed. And there was a little bit of difference of opinion across the leadership team, but generally we kind of figured out they need new computers. They needed a new software system. That was the key. If they had just gotten new computers, it would have been a failure, but a new software system and training for that software system. Leadership training, we have Center for Creative Leadership in our own backyard, and they had a great deal, 10 cents on the dollar, world-class training for nonprofit leaders. And then finally, we hired a development officer part-time. And so that nonprofit now believes that $50,000 our client gave them has been magnified to at least $500,000 and maybe more in actual value. So it can be done. It's just not easy.
Right.
Yeah. So that sort of gets us to our next one, which is sort of interwoven that, you see market-based solutions to problems and that are in our society. And the reality for a lot of problems in our society is if the free markets could have fixed them, they would have already fixed them. Mm-hmm. And so the focus of what Warren Buffett calls society's risk capital. That's what Warren Buffett calls the sector we're talking about. That risk capital and the good deployment of it is so critical in the future. And, the reality is that government has been strained to the point, whether we're talking federal, state, or local, that they're having trouble keeping up with a lot of this. So we have got to sharpen our axe in this area. And again, that's why I encourage people who have good skill sets, who, maybe they're approaching retirement, maybe they're already retired, try to find some organizations where you can make a difference, but try not to annoy the organization in the process of making a difference.
Seen that happen too, personally.
Yeah. Well, and so I mentioned in the article, there are a number of newly minted multimillionaires and billionaires, and particularly in the tech space, that believe that everything should be broken, disrupted, and fixed better. And again, sometimes, but a lot of times you need to not completely break something to make it better. And that kind of gets you into the ego side of this, and where you see the nonprofit as an implementer of your vision, your personal vision, and that can be tough. So one of the things in the Giving Done Right book that I thought Phil did a phenomenal job is great stories, by the way. I mean, stories that will warm your heart with all the things that are cooling your heart right now going on in the world. Stories that will warm your heart about how some very focused people are making a difference in our world. And one of the things Phil did really well in the book is talk about how can you make sure that the mission you're on isn't at odds with the mission of the nonprofit. Mm. And then you create a dilemma for the nonprofit, particularly if you're dangling a large check in front of them. Do they completely change what it is they're doing? And so again, I think this is one of those one size fits one, but a lot of people get fed up and say, oh, this nonprofit isn't going to do what I wanted it to do, so I'm going to start my own. Right. Well, Phil has a lot of stories of that can sometimes just be wasteful. And so again, all of this is just thinking more intentionally, digging a bit deeper, doing homework. And that gets to one of the really key pieces in the article that we see a mistake made all the time. And that is people don't do their homework. They think they know how a societal problem should be fixed, but they haven't actually ever talked to the people who have the problem. right down at the pavement level. I mean, seriously, at the pavement level. And so, this is one of those things that, again, we've had some well-intentioned money, including some billionaires who have spent a lot of money trying to fix some of the inequality issues in our country. And, I give them credit for trying and being creative, but a lot of money was wasted. And so if we can get this better coordinated, and that's one of the trends, by the way, one of the 16 trends in philanthropy that I think is positive for the next decade, is the coordination of resources is getting better and better. It has in the last decade, and it looks like it will continue to get better. And so that's, again, one of the bright stars of the future, is the ability to get the job done more effectively, whatever the mission is of the nonprofit.
So I want to thank you, as always, Dennis, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and chatting with us about these topics that I think greatly help our readers and our viewers.
You're very welcome, Bob. Thank you.